Well, I'm here today with Mac. And Mac, I would just like to ask you how you first became interested in the whole Bigfoot cryptid phenomena.
Well, uh, I'm kind of an old guy, and I recall vividly when the Patterson Gimlin film came out, and uh, I was intrigued, and uh, I wasn't a disbeliever. I was looking for someone maybe to, find out more about it, I suppose. But uh, sometime, so that was that. Uh, Sometime in the mid to early 70s. Uh, I went to middle and high school uh, in Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. I was lived just south of the Butler County line. Um, at that time, there was some weird stuff going on. There were uh, investigators going through the old coal mines and uh, woods, searching for Sasquatch. Uh, that was, what they call it, Chestnut Ridge and different places like that, not far from where I lived. Uh, so it was, the buzz was about, between my friends and stuff. Hey, did you see them guys? Yeah, we saw a carload of them. Didn't think much of it. Uh, Field parties were a big thing back then. Maybe they still are. Somebody get a couple cases of beer and build a big bonfire, and we'd be off, out in some farmer's field. And we did hear some uh, unexplainable, you'd have to call them howls. Um, and nobody was really that freaked out about it. Well, one night, same time period, my friend Eddie and I were just cruising back roads in his Fairlane, listening to 8-track tapes. It was one of the things we did a lot. And it was in the fall, uh, dark out, nighttime. Uh, we're cruising along, and we both seen it at the same time. Uh, Something very large, right at the just about the furthest extent of his headlights, uh, come across the road. And I mean, it was big. We couldn't really make detail, couldn't, you know, color or anything like that. It was quite large. And what got us is it was dragging a large dog by the tail across the road. And, we kind of looked at each other, and neither one of us could believe what we saw. Uh, and with all this other stuff going on, I guess we had an inkling. Um, well, that was that. And since then, I mean, I guess by then I was like, yeah, these things must exist, and are out there in the wild, and uh, don't know what they are. I just hear reports. Uh, and I've always been an outdoorsman. I camping, fishing, hunting, hiking. I still do a lot of some of that. Uh, and uh, try to get this in chronological order. Um, I I uh, leased a campsite off of it was on an Indian reservation on a large body of water near my home. Uh, I loved it down there. I was pretty remote where I was, and water was right there. I was down there to fish. Uh, had my boat and a little camper, and most often it was myself and my dog that would go down there. My wife would come, but she didn't want to go as often as I did. Um, so weekends, I was self-employed most of my life, and I'd try to get things buttoned up by the end of the day, Thursday. So Friday, I'd take off. I'd go down to camp, and me and my dog, Keisha. She was a large dog. She's a mixed breed. She was Chow Shepherd and Pit Bull, near as the vet has been able to determine. Uh, Absolutely fearless, super friendly with people, loved everybody. But a woodchuck, a raccoon, a bear. She was absolutely fearless, and on two different occasions chased bear out of my campsite and up a tree. And so she was a good companion. Nobody else around, and uh, I would, I wasn't down there to, stay up all night around the fire, drink a beer. I I generally shortly after sundown go to bed, and I'd be up an hour or so before the sun got up, get my coffee, maybe fix a little something to eat, and jump in my boat and go catch some walleye. Uh, and that's what I did for 17 years. I had that campsite. Now, I'm going to say that this had to have been maybe 2000. Well, I'm going to say I know, and now that I'm reflecting on it, it was 2007 in the spring, May. May is when the season opens, May 1st. Uh, it was 2007, May. Uh, Same scenario. I'm at camp. I'm up at 4 a.m. It's still kind of pretty dark at that hour in early May. And uh, I come outside my camper with Keisha, my dog, and my flashlight. And I went over to I had a picnic table there with a gas lantern, a Coleman lantern on it. And my grill was there. I was gonna fire that up and get something to eat. And so I went over to the table and pumped up the lantern, struck a match, put it in there. Well, when they come to life, they pop, poof, and and they're running. Well, when it did that, when it poofed like that, uh, right over there, and it couldn't have been much more than 30 feet away. Something just just started, and I still can't really describe it. It brought me to mind of those old Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan shows with the howler monkeys in the forest, but at a much higher volume with a scream mixed in, and it wouldn't stop. It stood right over there, and of course, because I'm like trying to peer through the darkness. Whatever it was just outside that circle of light that the lantern, and uh, I seemed like forever that it was screaming at me. And I was somewhat dumbfounded. I just, what could that possibly be? And I realized, well, from the direction of the sound, it was at least as tall as me. I'm 6 foot. And it's right over there. And it's just howling at me. And after a bit, I kind of come to my senses. I'm like, well, I'm trying to see it. And I couldn't, all I could really see was it was a little darker than the rest of the darkness, if that makes any kind of sense. And I remember, hey, I got a flashlight right here. But my right arm went across like this. I picked it up, and as I flung it back, the thing took off, thankfully, in the other direction at a blinding speed. I mean, it was just so fast I never spotted it. It went behind my camper. I could hear it smashing, crunching through the trees back there. And it was going from my left to my right. And well, the camper's only 25 foot or something. And it turned, and now it's paralleling me on my right. And yet, as fast as I could swing my arm, I could not catch up to whatever the heck that was running. And and then I'm on a hillside, and it's probably a 5 or 6 foot embankment there down to the dirt access road to the campsite. Well, it jumped off of that ledge, that hillside, and I heard it padding down the road away from it. Never saw it. Uh, I I would put my hand on a Bible and say that that thing was on two legs, whatever I never saw. And about that, when it padded away, that's when I noticed Keisha, my dog, was just a quivering mass of jelly between my legs, and just I had never seen her like that before in my life. She was just absolutely shaking, and, and, and looking to me for protection or something. Yes, but uh, so I'm like, I've never been afraid in the outdoors. I've spent an inordinate amount of time, out in various areas in the wilderness. So I wasn't like, but I looked at her and saw what a mess she was. And I figured, you know what, this morning I'm going to have my coffee indoors. I got a little propane stove, and I'll have my coffee in there. I'm waiting till sunup for it. So,
Well, let's go back. Let's go back a little ways because I have a lot of questions about some of these
okay,
things you said. We've jumped from the early 1970s all the way up to 2007 now. So
yeah,
that's a lot of time in between. But
that's a
whenever
big,
when you mentioned Chestnut Ridge, that caught my attention. Now, there's been a
yeah,
lot of activity reported from that area, right?
yes. And, uh, and a lot of sightings. I never had a sighting. Uh, I, I've heard vocalizations that, today I attribute to Sasquatch. Uh, I've actually, at that time when all these explorations, there was a lot of coal mines down there, not just strip mines, but a lot of tunnels, uh, mines that we used to monkey around and go, we're going to find this thing, and we'd go into some of these tunnels. I never saw anything, other than whatever that creature was dragging the dog across the road. And it was a large dog. it was a long time ago, but at the time and still today, I think it was like a big collie, not a little border collie, but a big collie dog.
Yeah,
Uh,
now was this daytime? This was nighttime after the
that was
party.
nighttime, and that was at the extreme distance of the headlight. So, I mean, we could see the dog was, orange and white and large, and we could see this huge figure with had it by the tail. I can't, it must have been his left arm uh, because it went from our right to the left, and we could see, the dog dragging behind this huge thing, and neither one of us knew what to make of it, uh, and it just kind of, you know, that was that. We never really talked too much about it. Uh,
Did you ever go back out there and look around and see if you could see
uh,
anything?
Never really got out, but that's where I lived. Uh, I lived at just outside of Bakerstown, Pennsylvania, which at the time was just a little crossroad. It's grown up now, but and I traveled that road to work every day. And uh, the school I went to is I'd drive right by past it. Uh, but no, I never really got out and looked around the tracks or anything like that. We just neither one of us were actually quite sure we saw what we saw. Uh, and it was just one of them things that kind of get buried in the back of your mind. I guess I do recall that color.
Exactly. Now you talked about all these investigators were coming and going from like those coal mine area, and a lot of people were looking for Bigfoot. Were the investigators just like lay people, researchers, or were these government people? Who were they?
Um, we were told they were investigators. Now, I've seen, and I can't think of the gentleman's name, but I've actually seen him on some of these YouTube videos. He's apparently from that area, and he was in on it, and probably some of his cohorts. And I, way I understood it, it was uh, government investigation, which I'm a 17-year-old teenager that, well, what do I know? Could have been anybody. Uh,
Was this around the same time that acorn-like craft came down and that got a lot of attention and a Bigfoot was seen coming out of a UFO?
Same general area. Um, that occurred a few years prior to what I saw. That happened, best of my knowledge, in like the 60s, maybe 66 or 5 or 7. I don't but that's in the same area. Uh, Matter of fact, my brother lived in that town, right just outside of it, uh, which for the life of me, I can't remember the name of the town, but uh, so yeah, there was a lot of weird stuff going on.
Well,
Um,
like what? What kind of weird other
well,
besides Bigfoot and UFO?
there were reports of UFOs, uh, and this, you know, I don't think you know, the Bigfoot thing. Um, they weren't saying we're looking for Bigfoot, but everybody knew they were, and uh, you know, the name Sasquatch would come up often enough, and at least on a couple of different occasions, um, at the um, keg parties out in the farmer's field, we would hear off in the woods, uh, and not a coyote owl, not a fox yip, uh, but a real you deep bellowing half roar howl. And uh, I was back as a younger man. I was in the woods an awful lot, you know, trapping muskrat, beavers, foxes. We didn't have coyotes where I'm at here right now at the time, what we do now. Uh, and nothing like that. So it was your classic howling, uh, real loud. It had to have been because, of course, we were listening from a distance. But and there's mentioned before, nobody really back. You're 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and you don't worry about too much uh, being able to harm you. And then we didn't. Uh, I don't know a whole lot about you know who was doing these investigations at that time, other than they were going on, and we would see, caravan going by full of guys, and had a little logo on the door, and somebody other than investigators. It seems like, uh, I wish I could remember the exact year. I wasn't out of high school yet, and I graduated in 75. So it had been either 73 or 74. Uh, right.
How long was it between the years when you were in high school and were you still in high school when you saw the thing carrying the dog across the road? Were you still in high school then?
I was still in high school then, yes.
Have you ever
Or
talked
I,
to have you ever talked to the guy that was with you, the person that was with you that also saw that?
I lost track of Eddie long ago. Uh, a couple years after I got out of high school, I moved back up where I was born, where I live today. Uh, and I haven't seen or hide or tail of him uh, since then. Uh, I really have no idea whatever became of him. But we never really talked about it because I think we both thought we were crazy or something. Yeah, but we seen it at the same time, and we looked at each other. Our eyes got big, and we're like, what was that? And, don't know, one of them things.
Yeah, when you see something like that and you can't explain it, your mind does kind of like go blank. You just don't know what to do.
That's exactly what it was. It's kind of like, well, I don't even think we told anybody. I told my brother some years afterwards what we seen, but uh, I we didn't, neither one of us talked about it, yeah, either to each other or anyone else. I know I didn't. Uh, but that was right in that time frame where all that investigations was going on, and
Did you ever hear anyone else talk about seeing a Bigfoot in the area or anything else in that area?
just no, I never did. Uh, However, in my circle of friends, several people have heard those unexplainable, I'll call them howls or screams, really, or um, and uh, they wonder what that was. Well, it had to be the Sasquatch that they're looking for, and we just said, okay, and um, it just kind of left it at that. It wasn't like a big traumatic deal or anything that uh, we had things on our mind, I guess, at the time that we thought was more important than some cryptid that hasn't been identified. Uh, just kind of just one of them things, got
Yeah,
people living in the
it's easy
caves.
to, yeah, it's kind of easy to just let something go like that, especially when you can't explain it
Yeah, yeah,
and just let it be. So you jump from that point in time, you've got this dog and it's 2007 now, it's spring
yeah.
2007. You hear these sounds in the woods and your dog is obviously behaving and you kind of saw a shadow or something moving and you thought it was probably bipedal.
It most definitely was bipedal and at least as tall as me. Judging, you can judge if something that close. If it was making noise that was on the ground, you'd say, yeah, it's down on the ground. Or if it was up in a tree, you'd look up. This thing was probably eye level. And uh and like I said, I was staring in that direction for the longest time. Couldn't tell you exactly how long, but it was screeching and howling constantly the whole time. And I'm trying to see it, and all I could make out is just a darker shape. I couldn't, no definition. And when it took off, it was like a lightning bolt. I mean, it just, I couldn't swing my hand fast enough to catch a glimpse of its tail out. It just, it went that way across the backside of my camper, and then down this way. And I thought, I better see it. And I jumped over that bank and ran down the road, and I could hear it down the road for a little while. And that's when I noticed my dog was freaking out. There's just and that freaked me out because she was a badass dog. I mean, she was not afraid of anything in the woods until then. And that gave me the creeps to the point where I went inside the camper and made my coffee in there, waited until sunup to go fishing. Now, that was the only experience I've ever had down there on that reservation. Uh, and I was on the quiet side of the water. There's a lot of stuff happening over there, but where I was, it was all just over. And on the other side of that mountain behind me is the Allegheny National Forest. That year, I believe it was in September, was when that gentleman from Pittsburgh had some trail cams up where he was going to go hunting that fall. And he captured those famous or infamous Jacobs photos. I'm sure you probably looked at them. Uh,
Well, describe them for our audience. What do they look like?
well, there was a series of pictures on that trail cam. And uh, some of the pictures were obviously bears, black bear. Okay, you could tell. Oh, there was a guy had put a pile of apples, I believe apples, on the ground. And had a camera back there pointed at it, and got some bear. I'm sure he got some deer. But one of the pictures they got was an upright figure, bent at the waist, bent down with one arm reaching further down, grabbing apple. And I'm sure that if someone, uh, Googled Jacob's photos, they would pop right up, and you can make your own mind up what that particular photo was. Uh, So-called experts say it was a juvenile Bigfoot, which would that was what 4 or 5 months. It was May, early May, when I had that incident in my uh, campsite. In September, I believe it was in September, possibly early October. of '07 when those photos were taken, just over that mountain behind me somewhere. It could have been real far. Uh, and and I've come to believe that that's what was in my campsite. Uh,
How long did
'Cause,
it take you to know about these photos?
uh,
That
it
yours.
was like, well, you know, that it was on the national news for 2, 3 nights. And then, you know, there was a lot of hubbub about it. I didn't have access to a computer or anything like that at the time. And, uh, you know, I did see the couple reports on TV about, oh, hey, somebody got a picture of Bigfoot. And they showed the photos, and you know how the news is. They go in cycles, and something else happens, and you never hear about it again. Uh, but later on, uh, well, when I seen that up, and they told the location, approximate location where it was, uh, I just kind of surmised, hey, that could very well be what was, because what was in my campsite absolutely was on 2 feet. And it didn't speak English. I mean, the way it was howling and but at the same time screaming, a real shrill, not going to a howl and just nonstop. And as quickly as it moved, uh, on 2 feet, I swear it was on 2 feet. Uh, if that thing wanted to get me or my dog, I wouldn't be speaking today because it was just like a bolt of lightning when it took off. It just crunch, crunch, crunch. I could hear it crashing through whatever was on the ground behind my, in the woods behind there. Yeah, and
Was,
that,
was the sound that this thing was making, was it anything audible, or was it just a howl and a scream and just this noise, or was it?
it's just a noise, just like like that explosion in a lantern. I don't know if you ever lit one, but they do. They pop it, and uh, that had to have startled it because the second it did that is the second that started all the racket, and it did not stop until it took off running. Uh, that didn't make a sound other than I could hear it crashing through I'm sure there was probably some dead limbs and whatnot on the ground back there. I did, you know, I hung out inside my camper till it was light enough that I could ski, and I just jumped in my boat and went fishing. Uh, Generally, I'd come back, 10 o'clock or something, clean my catch and get lunch. And well, when I came back, cleaned up my catch, and I did go back there behind the camper and to see if I could see some kind of evidence. Yeah, I couldn't see anything. Uh, Ground was pretty hard packed. I don't think it had rained in a while. And so I really couldn't see any evidence like footprints or anything like that.
Well,
Uh,
after this thing left, and like say the next day, how was your dog behaving then?
well, once we got in the boat, she was calmed down, and she loved being that boat. It was crazy. Had to weigh 110 pounds, but she would take all four of her feet and put on that where the bow line is on a small boat
Hmm.
and balance herself there. And she would yip, 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 and she just loved being in the boat, and she was all good. And I never, she didn't have any like lasting effects from it that I could tell. I mean, she'd still chase a bear if she had an opportunity, or have a fight with a woodchuck or something like that. Far as I know, she had no, I couldn't tell where she was like,
Did you go
damn.
back camping at that same site again?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I'm not going to let an incident like that keep me. Yeah, I had to, uh, that was in '07. It was 2017. Uh, my wife had passed in 2016. Yeah, I tried to go camping and I'd go down. It just wasn't, my heart wasn't there. It was somewhere else. Well, yeah. Uh, so I think it was, I don't think I was down there 3 times in 2 years. And uh, I was asked if I was still paying for it, you know, on a yearly basis. And I was asked if I would give that spot up in exchange for another spot, um, because I could get a heck of a lot more money for it than what I was uh, grandfathered into. Um, and I agreed. And I've been kicking myself ever since because I miss it. Uh, yeah, no, it didn't. It, I it didn't slow me down a bit as far as enjoying the outdoors and hiking the woods. And uh, I think I mentioned before that there's really nothing out there I'm scared of. I am a country boy. Uh, I get scared in the city. Okay, I don't like being in a city. I mean, not scared, I've been to them, but uh, I'm much more at home in the woods. Uh, there's swamps up out back here. There's the swamps start back there a quarter mile, and they run 20 miles one way and 10 the other. And I've roamed every inch of it. I like to say, I'm sure there's a couple spots I haven't set foot on, but my whole life, literally. And uh, so yeah, I mean, we have black bear. We have. Uh, I've actually seen two cougars. The DEC will never admit to it, but they're out there. Uh, you know, you name it, bobcats, whatever, coyotes. Now we got a million of them around. None of that stuff phases me. Uh, I I do what I do. I was just up in the woods yesterday. Well, the past couple of weeks I've been planting trees up there. And, yeah,
It's
nothing.
it's been a while since 2007. So that's almost 20 years now, 18 or so years. So have you had any other incidences, encounters, or sightings or
Yes.
okay, tell me
Uh,
about those.
so in uh, 2006, I was fortunate enough to uh, I purchased some woods for myself and my sons to hunt on, and uh, not a lot of acreage. It's 16 acres, and it's a rectangle, about 2 acres this way and 8 that way. So it's about a third of a mile. And if you add on to the road, I have a access. It's not a right of way. I own a strip of 30-foot strip that goes down to the highway. Uh, so when I purchased it, uh, it had been timbered. Uh, we have a lot of a big Amish community here, and everybody's got a sawmill in their front yard. And uh, one gentleman, what he does is he'll buy some timber property. He'll take what he wants off of it and then auction it off. So I bought it at auction. Um, and it perfect. I mean, he took the big money trees, the large hickory and the butternut uh, and and ash up there. Two people couldn't put their arms around. Well, he took that, but he left all the uh, all the smaller trees, of course, and all of the hemlock, which was awesome because deer love to hang out in hemlock forest. Um, so when I purchased it, you couldn't hardly walk through it, for all the tops. They'll cut off one or two logs off the tree and leave the rest right there, and it's a mess. So I was up there. I wasn't working. That's probably about 3 miles from my house. If I wasn't working, I was up there limbing tops and cutting it into firewood chunks and getting it out of the woods and uh, go back and do it again. It literally took me 3 years to get up to the back property line. And one morning, uh, I would weekends. I'm an early riser. I don't sleep in. No, I gotta see the sun come. Well, at that period of time, I was up early. I might get something to eat, and I'd shoot right up there. I had a four-wheeler with a nice tandem axle cart, and I uh, uh, would leave it right up there, and 2 or 3 chainsaws and everything else I might need. Uh, I was heading up there one morning, and my dog, it was a different dog, and a little baby pit bull. I called her my log dog. She just loved being in the woods. She'd spend all day with me up there. Just she wouldn't never be out of my sight. She'd be either laying down staring at me, how they are. Now, well, one morning we were heading up there. It was just getting light. It was in the summer months, or couldn't tell you which month. Uh, but it was a nice morning, and loaded up my stuff, and I'm got going up the trail, motoring along, not real fast, just chugging up there. And I get up to the end of my property, and from there, this is approximately a 14 square mile block of woods. It's all privately owned. And that guy owns that. This guy owns, there's no houses or nothing up there. What at the end of my property line, there's a big spruce forest, which I'm surmising was planted back in the Depression days. CC make work programs, and they planted trees everywhere, and some dishes where they did. But that's how this forest was planted, and now they're 90 years old. They're 100-foot tall spruce trees, and a lot of blowdowns in there. And and I get up to the end of my property, and there's that forest. I shut the machine off. Now it's dead quiet except for your wood knock right over there. Another one right there. A third one right here. Another one back over here. And they just kept knock, 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 knock. And I'm thinking, by then, of course, I've heard about wood knocks. Well, I'm thinking, my first guess was that a gang of Amishmen were back there driving deer. Well, they do that, and they don't always follow the hunting regulations as far as seasons go. That was my first guess, but these knocks continued, knock, 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 and they were getting closer, like they were converging onto my location. And I'm listening to this. I'm still on my machine, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to sit right here, and nothing's going to stop me from doing what I got to do. So I got off the machine, and I grabbed my saw and the axe, and walked toward the east a little ways, and I went down a trail that I had started there where I was working my way back down that way. And I probably went, I don't know, 400 feet or something like that, down back down the hillside, and probably, I don't know, 80, 90 foot this way and 400 that way. And and I could still hear the convergence, just like a baseball bat against a tree. And I got to where I wanted to work, and I could hear this happening. Well, then it sounded like, to me, of course, I couldn't see, but it sounded like it stopped right where my machine was. And I think, well, I'm going to make some noise. I fired up my chainsaw and just started working. And, you know, I worked the rest of the day, and I went, when I got back to my machine, nothing was touched, no damage, everything was still good. So I just kind of smiled, you know, but at that time, I'd already been up there on a really regular basis for 2.5, 3 years. And so it's not like the clan didn't know I'm not a threat. I'm up there hunting, and I'm up there cleaning up the woods. I'm not, they kind of know who I am. And I guess, and so I wasn't scared for my life or anything like that. I was just like, internally, I probably had a smile that big. Uh, so that was kind of a really interesting thing. Um, so now I've got it all cleaned up there. And at the time, I could walk like this all through there and never even trip over a stick. I cleaned it up real nice. A lot of, still a lot of trees and stuff, uh, and I bought it so I can have a private place to deer hunt. I don't eat beef. I'll eat like grass-fed beef from the farmer down the road, but the stuff in the store makes me sick. So I eat venison or fish. Or I've got huge gardens out back. I grow a lot of stuff. And blackberries are ripe around here in August. This is something that really had perplexed me and still does to this day. Uh, and sometime after, years, I don't know, a few years after I finished the thing, so probably 2010 maybe or something like that. Um, when woods get timbered like that, the regeneration starts. You'll start getting a lot of saplings, but you'll also get a lot of berry bushes. Well, the blackberry bushes came on big time. They probably come on first, and uh, it had been in August because uh, that's when they're ripe. But I was picking blackberries, and there were some blackberries big as my thumb. Some people call them huckleberries, but I call them blackberries. Uh, and I was almost up to all the way up where the knocking was going on. There was a huge patch there. And I'm going around this thing picking berries, putting them in my bucket. Well, it's a big patch. And I can see blackberries back there. Boy, I can't reach them, And wish it would tear you up. I'm walking around the perimeter, reaching as far as I can, and I get around the back side of it, and here there was a pathway of crushed down berry plants going into it. I figured a bear went in there and was eating berries. Uh, my initial thought. And so I went right in there, and now I'm picking berries. I get in the center of that was a circle of flattened down vegetation, the berry bushes. It might have been 9 or 10 foot diameter, pretty much a round circle in there. And berry bushes are like this. And this is what I know what I saw. Right in the middle of that flattened vegetation was a pile of mud about that thick. And in the center of that pile of mud was a perfect footprint, toes and all. The foot was this long. And I looked and I couldn't believe my eyes. There's no mud within the closest water, there's a little creek 100 yards away. And that mud was on top of the berry bushes with that perfect footprint. And I looked at that and I'm thinking, I have got to cast this thing. Of course, I'm picking berries. I don't have plaster with me or anything like that. But as a contractor, I got a couple bags of plaster of Paris up in my barn at home. It's only 3.5 miles from here. So I got to get a casting of this. And I started heading out of the woods to go get it. And by the time I got down the hill to my truck, it had started to drizzle a little bit. By the time I got to the end of my driveway there and out to the road, it was raining. By the time I got home, it was just a downpour. And, I'm not, I would have had the forethought to put down all my jacket or something over it. Of course, it was warm. I didn't have a jacket, but so, and I had never heard of anything even remotely similar to that. Uh, I mentioned that I used to trap beaver, and well, a beaver will make a pile of mud just like that, and he'll put a scent on it, territorial marker type thing, and that's what it brought me to mind of was a mud pile that a beaver makes. Of course, that footprint in there, not a beaver, and so that I, asked a couple of people that might be knowledgeable if they've ever heard of that, anything like that before. Nobody has, but maybe if someone watches this, they will have experienced something like that. Um, but again, I just smile and I go back up there. When I go deer hunting, I got all the way up in the back corners. My favorite deer stand. I've got 2 or 3 of them scattered around there, and I'll typically, uh, get up early, have your coffee, uh, be in the woods by 5:30 ish. Take that slow hike up there, still dark, and get up in my stand. Well, several times, uh, going up there in the mornings. Of course, I got brush piles here and there from when I cleaned up the stuff, and about halfway up there was a pretty good couple of piles there. Yeah, pitch start be slowly creeping up the trail heading to my stand, and an owl would hoot. Okay, owls hoot. Generally, they're not on the ground in a brush pile. Uh, and then the second one would hoot in the next pile here, a little ways up. And an owl, um, when they hoot, the hoo, 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 they'll trail off like that. Well, this is just like hoop hoop, you know, and hoop hoop is here. And that's happened several times. Uh, Not more than, oh, can't be much more 60, 70 foot from my trail where I'm walking. And, you know, could it be an owl underneath that brush pile? Well, I suppose. Generally they're in the trees. And I just keep on going. Um, on occasion, uh, I'd be up there, oh, like while planting trees. Just recently. Uh, yeah, I got to dig a pretty good hole on my knees, dig it with my hands. Once I get it broke up, uh, there'd be a loud stick break right over there, out of my sight, but in the behind a bunch of slashings or something. And uh, deer don't make a lot of noise when they're going through the woods, and they don't break sticks, and you don't hear a crack like that. Uh, and I notice it every time, and occasionally, uh, kind of embarrassed to admit it, but I'll say something to the effect, well, don't be afraid, let me see you. And uh, I just go about my work. Uh, 2 years ago in the fall, it was in November. Uh, Generally, deer season opens, I'm going to say the 17th of November here. And generally, uh, we'd already had a foot of snow or so by then. Well, all we had that year, a couple of years ago, was rain and, snow flurries. And not only do I have stands, which, you climb up and you sit down and you wait, but I love to what they call still hunt, which is somewhat of a misnomer because you walk, but it might take 15 minutes to go 30 feet. Take a step and you scan, you're just moving your eyes. And the next step you take, you have a different perspective. And you scan, and it was nice because had been raining and everything was soggy and wet, uh, real quiet. And I got, I don't know, third of the way up or something like that. And uh, I'm creeping along. And right in front of me on a sapling, about that big around, not very, not very big, and little twigs and branches on it. Well, this high up to me, on my about chin height, there was a deer leg hanging, the lower part and part of the front part. It had the hoof, and I met at the knee and was over this twig of branch, and the leg bone, it wasn't sawed off, it was snapped. And I took a couple pictures of it, a couple different angles, and there's no way. There's bobcat up there. There's fisher cats, they call them up there. Raccoons, of course. That little twig of a tree would never support the weight of a bobcat or even an owl or something if they happen to pick up a. So whatever put that there, placed it there on that little twig of a branch that couldn't have been much bigger than a piece of spaghetti, really, noodle, you know. So I'm like, and I was at a convergence of deer trails there. So I thought, well, I'm just going to hang out here. And I went sat on a log with a couple trees around them. I wasn't really well hidden, but I felt that I was concealed enough that because I could see, leaves were down, and if something were to come up any of those paths, I'd be able to, I just sat there. Uh, when I come upon that leg, it probably had about, I don't know, 40 minutes till dark. So it was probably 20 after 4 or something like that. And I'm just sitting there, nothing happening. And probably about uh, 20 minutes later, so it'd been quarter over 20 of 5, uh, I hear that owl off to my right. And that forest hadn't been timbered in, 35, 50 years, who knows? Uh, and I hear the owl. And immediately, right over here, on the other side of my property, there's a return hoop. Well, owls will do that. They'll hoot, and now this guy will hoot. Well, as I mentioned before, they have that distinctive trailing off at their last hoot. Well, this wasn't happening. It was just hoot, 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 hoot. And uh, so I'm sitting there, and this one off to my right started coming this way, hooting the whole time. And you can kind of tell the direction of sound, and owls can fly through some pretty thick stuff. That can do. But this thing was uh, flying low, which sounded to me like maybe 10 foot or something off the ground, and it was moving kind of quickly from my right to my left, and and I'm thinking, well, when it comes out of that deep woods through them slashings, I got a view for a ways. And this thing over here was still hooting. Well, I I couldn't see it. It was just beyond my where I could see. I passed up, and now it's kind of to the left of me and in front of me, and it's still going hoot, 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 and that right in mid hoot was this garbled up half howl. It was the weirdest sound I've ever heard in my life, but then it started hooting again. So that was kind of cool, I thought. I mean, right in mid hoot, because it never quit hooting. It was hoot, 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 and then again.
Well, you've had a lot of experience in the woods and you've had a lot of experience in nature to be able to tell the difference between some of these animal sounds and some of the more bizarre, unusual sounds that you might refer to as possibly a Bigfoot.
I have I've had more than a lot of people, I suppose. There's a lot of people that have been in the woods a lot more than me, but uh, I've been, uh, I've never been to British Columbia or like that, but I've roamed all around. There are t tens and tens of thousands of acres of state and national forests and privately owned forests where I live, and that's what I love to do. I like to hike. A lot of people like to walk and walk the road uh, and breathe the car smoke when it goes by. And I like to hike. I'll go up into the woods and I will hike in the woods and just see. Uh, that's my happy place, I guess you could say. Uh, I and yeah, I can tell difference between a fox and a dog, or a coyote and a dog, or and the sounds I've heard uh, a lot of them I can identify immediately, and some of them I've just come to believe that that's got to be the big guy. And I'm not no. It gets better, Linda. Um I'm trying to recall the year. It's been about 5 years now since my last eyeball to eyeball. There he is. And prior to that, it was 2 years before prior to that. So that there he is. And both times I was I was actually going up. It was in the hadn't been early spring because the vegetation wasn't really up all that much. And I was going to go up to my deer stand. I had a what they call a pole saw. It's fiberglass pole with a regular saw on the end, and it will extend out 10, 12 feet, something like that. And I was going to go up, climb my stand with that, and reach out and cut a couple limbs off that I thought were in my way. So I had that with me, and probably a little else, bottle of water or something. And I, I get about halfway up, and I heard clear as a bell, just like you said it. Whoop. That's exactly what it sounded like. Snapped my head to the right, and there he was. He was no more than 70 yards from me. And I know that distance because I was basically kind of in the arc away from one of my son's deer stands, and he'd taken a deer right by that wood pile one year, and we paced it off at 70 yards. So I'm calling it 70 yards, uh, give or take. And I had a clear, unobstructed view of this magnificent creature. And I can't tell you how blessed I felt at and he was broadside, or, facing I could see his shoulder, his head, his side, his massive chest, just unbelievable chest. Uh, Legs down to just above his knees. I couldn't see because he was behind this pile of logs that had got shoved up there by the skidder years before. And I know that log pile. It comes up about my waist. People say, well, how tall was it? I don't know. But I know how tall that wood pile was. And how far above his knees I was looking at, I don't know. But I could see quite a bit of thigh, see his buttocks. I could see the whole thing, but in profile. And he wasn't moving. And I don't know how long I stared at that thing. Uh, just, I don't even know what I was thinking, other than I'm trying to take it all in. And after a period of time, as they're walking away, the way he was going, and it seemed like he just was gone like smoke. I didn't, I couldn't see it no more. But there's a lot of slashings and stuff. A deer will do the same thing. You'll be looking at them, the next thing they're gone. So I'm not saying anything magical like you poof, he's gone, or he's just gone. I probably watched him take for 40 or 50 feet, walk that way, and then he was gone. And I just was, like I said, I was just beaming inside, like I had just been touched by the hand of God, is what I felt like. Look, honestly, I can't describe it any different. And I just carried on with what I was doing, went up and my deer stand, did my thing, and spent the day up there and come back. And uh, about a year, like I said, I'm terrible with times, but it had to have been 2 years later. And I don't know what I was, I'm always up there doing something. So what I was doing that day, I don't know, hiking, I guess. And get up, I swear my feet were in the same two spots they were before, heading the same direction I was before. And I hear whoop. I look, there he is again. Got to be the same one. I mean, it just, but this time you're looking directly at me. Like, and at 70 yards with unobstructed view, I mean, his shoulders look like a sheet of plywood. And he was behind that same exact pile of wood. Same. The first time I seen it, I figured that's the neighbor down here screwing around. Got himself a Bigfoot costume, is what my immediate thought was. And then I got to think, well, that guy's only 5'2" tall. And this thing is obviously a heck of a lot bigger than that. And when I'm looking at it, that's the doggone Sasquatch. And the second time when I seen him was just the same feeling inside, no malevolence whatsoever. Uh, I didn't sense anything other than I felt love, what I felt, and peace. And but like that might not be big enough. A sheet of plywood's 4 foot. His shoulders were just massive. Hair color, I don't know. It was brownish. Um, chest was like black. The face was like, from what I could tell, that just looked black, leathery or something. I don't know, but it not a face of a gorilla. Um, it was. I just felt all I what I really remember about that whole both of things was a feeling of peacefulness and uh,
Now, where
and love.
were you? Where were you when these things happened? When these two sightings happened, were you still in near that
I was
campsite or?
I was in my woods. It was the same place I saw the footprint in the berry patch and the wood knockings and all of that. Uh, and I uh, the same exact spot, both actual sightings. They're exactly the same spot. He was in the same place. I was in the same place. And uh, one time was profile. So I'd say the face was flat like mine, you know. We didn't have a muzzle or anything like that, anything weird. Uh, but 70 yards is 70 yards, 210 feet or something like that. So you're not going to see real crisp detail. Uh, but I saw enough to know what I was looking at. And uh, I, I some folks might say I never wouldn't step foot in the woods again after I had my experience. And me, I'm probably the total opposite of that. Uh, I don't mess with them. I don't go up there, and try to take their pictures and all this stuff and banging on trees and hooting and I don't do none of that. Uh, I do what I do and leave them alone. And I truly feel like I was blessed that they allowed me, and I think it was the same one. He allowed me to see him a couple times, and I hope he does again before I die. I'd love to have a sit down one. Tell you the truth.
Yeah,
So,
it sounds like where you are, there may be a good number of these out there. You know, I know it's few and far between the sightings, but at the same time, it's like you probably have more sightings than a lot of people have had. So there must be some Bigfoot clans somewhere in that vicinity.
um, there are uh, there are some folks in my area that regularly call themselves investigators and go out in the middle of the night and uh, I that's why I don't want anybody up there harassing in my little cube of woods there. Uh, and to my knowledge, there aren't there's plenty of public land around where they can do that, and I'm sure that they probably had good results. But I don't do anything to intentionally to disturb their. They don't live right there. They come through there often enough. I've seen evidence of that. Um, and uh, I have seen, well, I saw that one footprint, which just blows my mind. It blows my mind that that mud was on top of that vegetation with a perfect print right in the middle.
Yeah,
Of it.
that is very interesting and very, very odd. I have to 100% agree with that.
And it just, yeah, I
Yeah.
just still scratching my head about that. Uh,
I think we're all going to be scratching our head on that one. You know, in all of the 400 and some interviews I've done with people who have had encounters with Bigfoot or do Bigfoot research, I don't think I ever heard that particular one. So I'm going to ask around and see if I can figure that.
Please do. And if you find anyone else has seen any kind of behavior like that, I would love to know. Uh,
Exactly. Yeah. I will definitely do that. I'm going to have to go ahead and end our interview today, Mac. I really appreciate you coming on. I know we had a little bit of mix up from time to time about trying to get you on here, but we finally did it. We finally made it. So I thank you very, very much. And I'll let you know when this comes out.
well, thank you. It's my pleasure.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.
You too.